All right, Shalom, Shabbat, Shalom, Barakat Yahweh, Barakat Yahweh Shai, Barakat Yahweh, Barakat Yahweh Shai, Barakat Yahweh, Barakat Yahweh Shai, Barakat Yahweh, Barakat Yahweh Shai. Call Halayim La Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahweh Shai, Bahasham, Rakah HaKodash. And what you just heard me speak was the Lashawan Kodash, which translated means the holy tongue, all right, which is the ancient Paleo Hebrew. Okay. And I would like to give double honors to the apostles and elders of Great Millstone, better known as GMS, who rule well. Peace and salutations unto the hopeful elect, the tabernacle of David, started with 144,000, and the rest of the men, women, and children out of the 12 tribes whom Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahweh Shai will ultimately have mercy upon in these last days. I'm your brother Matazabath from the branch of the Great Millstone here in Melbourne, Australia. Okay, and through the Spirit, I want to tackle a video that the beloved elder Karat Zabba from GMS Baltimore, his page, YouTube handle, as you can see here on the screen, Biblical Defenders. All right, subscribe so that you may be edified. The elder posts very edifying videos. All right, now there was a situation that happened between Watchmen for Israel, or as we like to call them, Wi-Fi, Israelite camp, and they had some dealings with VOCAB Malone. Okay, now the topic, which made, unfortunately, these gentlemen up here look kind of bad in a sense, was VOCAB asked them a question dealing with 1 Timothy 3:1 and verse 2, where it talks about the overseers and the wives. And what you're going to see is VOCAB asks the head of the camp to pretty much answer this question. What does that mean? Because what these Christian apologists like to do, they like to use the New Testament to sit there and say on one end of the spectrum that the law pretty much has changed dealing with marriages, and that the New Testament pushes monogamous marriages rather than polygynous marriages, right? And you're going to see that's far from the truth, because we're going to show you that the law was never done away with. And what you're going to see also, that it's written within our law that a man can have multiple women. But what VOCAB doesn't understand, dealing with 1 Timothy 3 verses 1 and 2, is that it was more so about the order that was being brought back to the Israelites that Apostle Paul, his epistles, was touching on, because you have to understand the dispensation of time, being in the Roman Empire and under the Roman law within that society back then. The Roman law pushed for monogamous marriages. They were so much with polygynous encounters, so to speak. So just like today, we are in Rome 2.0 all again, and America pushes for monogamous relationships. That's why a lot of our people being trained up in a Western mental, state or mindset, they have an issue with the word polygyny. Okay, so what I hope through the Spirit and power of Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahweh Shah to do in this lesson is to give you the correct understanding of an overseer or a bishop, and why it was said for a bishop to be the husband of one wife, what that actually really means, because you have to understand the history in order to know the mystery why Apostle Paul wrote that epistle to Timothy, whom he set up Timothy, all right, to be an overseer over the congregation. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to play this clip just so you can see what this devil says to these gentlemen up here, because on one end of the spectrum, I was trying to root for Watchmen for Israel, even though because we don't hate these brothers. Okay, we don't hate none of the Israelite camps. We just dislike when they go off in doctrine. But at the end of the day, they're still our brethren. And what you also have to understand is that when we have opposition, okay, such as VOCAB that comes up, of course, we're always going to be rooting for our people. Okay, but unfortunately, in this space, they kind of make themselves, look bad by not answering the question, because I don't really believe that they were taught from their elders, whoever is the head of that organization, the actual correct understanding dealing with that passage. So I'm gonna shut my mouth and let's get into this video.
You know? Yes, all right, well, here's what the scripture actually says, though. This is important, what it actually says. It is a trustworthy saying, if a man aspires to do the work of an overseer, he desires a good work. An overseer then must be above reproach, the husband of one wife. So if any of you are overseers, you're supposed to have only one wife, according to 1 Timothy chapter 3. Number boundaries and the model for the congregation. That means other people in the congregation should also only have one wife. But you guys are out here teaching people they can have as many wives as they want. Now, why do you teach that? The Bible says you can only have one wife in 1 Timothy chapter 3.
And you see, if you're not well studied in the scriptures, okay, this is the response that's going to happen. Notice they're searching for scriptures, and if I continue to play the video, you want to see they couldn't answer that. Okay, which is a similar situation to what happened with another individual that came up to the elders out there in Dallas, GMS Dallas, when you had a ISUPK member who came up to the camp, and Elder Yashawamba, in a similar stance, asked him a particular question dealing with the scriptures, and he couldn't answer it. You see? But I'll address that in a different video, because I was speaking to the brother Yashar and Abaratazah, if the spirit permits us sometime this week, we can address that situation and align it with this video too. But the point of the matter is, let me take this back so you can hear what this devil had to say.
This is a trustworthy saying, if a man aspires to do the work of an overseer, he desires a good work. An overseer then must be above reproach, the husband of one wife. So if any of you are overseers, you're supposed to have only one wife, according to 1 Timothy chapter 3, number 1. Number 2, overseers set the boundaries and the model for the congregation. That means other people in the congregation should also only have one wife. But you guys are out here teaching people they can have as many wives as they want. Now, why do you teach that? The Bible says you can only have one wife in 1 Timothy chapter 3.
And that's wrong. And I agree with the elders' little pop-up prompter. He just made that shit up, because 1 Timothy 3:1 does not lay the groundwork to establish that a man can only have one wife. That's hearsay. That's not what it's saying. So let's come over here. Okay. Now notice it says overseers and deacons. If you pay attention to this whole chapter, basically Apostle Paul was restoring the order within the congregation. Now we're going to show you what was taking place in history, okay, in order for you to get the context of why he stated this. So first, let's read this verbatim. 1 Timothy 3:1, this is a true saying, if a man desire the office of a bishop. Let's stop right there. Okay? Because when you go into the Greek word for bishop, all right?
Strong's G, 1984, episcope. Episcope.
It says investigation from the outline of biblical usage, inspection, visitation, the act by which the Most High Yahweh looks into and searches out the ways, deeds, character of men in order to adjudge them their lot accordingly, whether joyous or sad, oversight, overseership, office, charge, the office of an elder. You see? The overseer or presiding officers of a Christian church. Now, what you have to understand is when you are giving leadership over a congregation, your sole purpose is to focus on the will of Yahweh B'Shem Yahushai over that congregation. Okay. Hence why when we go back, let's read it again. This is a true saying. If a man desire the office of a bishop, he desired that good work. But here's the point. Verse 2, a bishop then must be blameless, the husband of one wife, vigilant, sober, of good behavior, given to hospitality, apt to teach. And we're going to stop right here. The main point I want to focus on in this verse is right here. A bishop then must be blameless, the husband of one wife. What Christian apologists like to do, and many others within, the Christianity sect, is they take this out of context because reading it verbatim, they don't understand the history behind why this was said. And what, 9 times out of 10, what they'll allude this to is being blameless, meaning all. And one aspect, they'll say that a bishop couldn't remarry because if he will go divorce and remarry another woman, that will give a bad look on the ministry. That's the first part of the spectrum of what they'll try to say. The second part is they'll allude polygyny as being something frowned upon, right? And so if a bishop got caught having multiple women, then he wouldn't be blameless, right? But we're going to show you what this is actually going into. Now I have here, okay, this is from studylight.org, a commentary. And I forget the actual, let me see, Benson's commentary on the Old and the New Testaments, all right, to show you that, sometimes you have to go into the scholarship because sometimes the scholars, they get it right. Other times they don't get it right. But we're going to take the meat, all right, chew the meat, and we're going to spit out the bone. Now, let me see here because I just want to get to the point where I'm going to start right here. It says, but parity of reason, it allows men to marry a second time likewise. Wherefore, when it is said here that a bishop must be the husband of one wife, and 1 Timothy 5:9, which speaks about a widow having been the wife of one husband, okay, meaning that she wasn't unfaithful or anything else like that, jumping from man to man, right? It says that the widow who is employed by the church and teaching the young of her sex must have been the wife of one husband. Okay, now why is that? And I'm gonna stop right here because imagine a situation, which I'm also going to tap into a little bit later. You had back then, especially in the church of Corinthians, under the Greco-Roman rituals and paganism, they were known for being in and out of polygamous relationships. So imagine if you had a female who was past the age of 60 years old and she became a widow, she lost her husband, but she was known from the congregation to be going from man to man. That's not a good look to bring her into the congregation, teaching the younger women. You will rather have a woman who is faithful to that one man and show forth her faithfulness to the congregation. She will be more so a provider in a sense, going back to Titus, the 2nd chapter, where it says about the older women teaching the younger women. That would be more suitable. That's what it was, alignment. That's the alignment to 1 Timothy 5:9, right? But you're going to see a little bit later on as we continue to go into it. It says the apostle could not mean that persons who have married a second time are thereby disqualified for the sacred offices, right? Because let's say if you was a bishop and you lost your wife or whatever the case may be, or you divorced her for whatever grounds, that didn't mean that you couldn't go and remarry a second time. You actually have apostolic Christians out there, right? Especially those who are under pastor or so-called pastor Geno Jennings. They teach this. They teach that it's unlawful for you to remarry again. You see, they teach that, especially women, according to the law in Romans the 7th chapter, if their husband died, which the scripture says they can remarry again, but they'll say that, well, no, you can't, you really can't do that. But anyway, it says, for in that case, a bishop whose wife dies while he is young must lay down his office unless he can live contently unmarried. The apostles' meaning, therefore, in these canons is that such persons only were to be entrusted with sacred offices who in their married state had contended themselves with one wife and with one husband at a time, because thereby they had showed themselves temperate in the use of sensual pleasures. And that's what it was about. Now, why did it say sensual pleasures? Now you have to understand the dispensation of time, because back then, all right, if we come over here, all right, and I just pulled some information off of Google, because, you know, you brothers really need to learn how to study and get into the habit of going into the historical counts to pay attention to what was going on. Right now, I typed in during the apostles' time, what was the Roman rule as far as monogamy goes versus polygamy relationships? And this is what it said. It says, during the apostles' time, Roman law strictly enforced monogamy. Just like today in Babylon the Great America, monogamy is pretty much forced. There's some states that actually, you know, they are against polygynous relationships, and they also can fine you and you can get in trouble. Okay, so just like back in the ancient world, and the Roman law is strictly enforced monogamy. You couldn't really do polygyny except if you were wealthy, which is going to explain, right? So it says the Roman law strictly enforced monogamy, viewing polygamy as illegal and immoral. And that's another thing, because when you go into this word polygamy, all right, actually, let me do this, because there's a difference between polygyny and polygamy, okay, which our people was practicing both, but it's important that you understand what the two words mean. Now, if we type in polygamy, okay, this is what it actually means. It says polygamy, marriage with more than one spouse. All right, let's see here. The word is not etymologically restricted to marriage of one man and multiple women, technically polygyny, right? Because polygamy means that it's not only centered around a man having more than one woman, but it's also centered around a woman having multiple men. That's what the word polygamy falls under. So when you talk about polygamy with an M, it's speaking about both sexes. They can be with multiples of the other partners. However, when you talk about polygyny with an N, okay, it says condition of having many wives, marriage or cohabitation of one man with more than one woman at the same time. This is what the law permitted for Israelite men to do. Okay, so yes, this word here, polygyny, okay, is what was lawful according to Exodus 21st chapter. This is what you have to understand. This is why it's important looking up your words. However, this word here, polygyny, okay, or polygamy, Salakia, this is unlawful, okay, because a woman cannot be with multiple men, okay? And we're going to see that in John, the 4th chapter, as we compare a scenario dealing with the Samaritan woman and Yahushua. So now that we have that understanding, let's bring our attention back over here. And I'm going to read this one more time. It says, during the apostles' time, Roman law strictly enforced monogamy, viewing polygamy as illegal and immoral, a practice that distinguished them from other cultures. While legal marriage was always monogamous, wealthy Roman men could and did have multiple sexual partners. You see, creating a nuanced reality where monogamy was the legal standard, but not the only practice in social life. It says key aspects of Roman marriage law. Prescriptive monogamy. Roman citizens could only have one legal spouse at a time, much like today here in Babylon the Great America. Purpose of marriage. Marriage was a significant institution for forming family alliances, uniting economic and political interests, producing legitimate heirs. Distinguishing feature. Monogamy was a key cultural practice that Romans believed set them apart from degenerate barbarians. You see that? So to really understand this, when this is why I said in previous videos, I've done topics on this already, but I'm just, going deeper into it so that you brothers can have the understanding. when you teach this, or if you ever, spend some time on this topic, you have to go into the depths of this in order to really give that individual who you're dealing with perfect sound understanding as to what is really going on. Because this whole monogamous relationship that started with the Romans. You see what I'm saying? And you can go deeper into that history if you choose to, but you just got to look it up. Now it says here, the polygamy in the Roman world limited practice. It says legal Roman marriage was monogamous, but powerful, wealthy men could engage in resource polygyny. Okay, a man having multiple women, having multiple sexual relationships alongside their one legal wife. Not widespread for the average person, polygamy was not considered the norm. Why? Because when you actually go into the institutional practices, okay, you had certain sects and Oriental nations that practice polygamy for the worship of their gods and deities. Okay. Regional differences. While strictly enforced elsewhere, Romans were more tolerant of polygamy within Palestine, particularly of the Ish population, though it was still declining. All right. Because, yeah, when you're under a system such as the Jews being under the Roman system, a lot of them resorted to the Roman ways, just like in Babylon the Great today. Right. You being brought up in a Western society that predicates itself on monogamous relationships. That's how you're going to view things. So when you hear the prophets coming out telling you that, well, yes, according to our ancient custom, polygyny was very lawful. Of course, it's not going to sit right with you because you've only been taught one way. That's why a lot of, especially you women, you have a problem when the topic multiple wives comes up, because you have been brought up in a system where they predicate themselves on monogamous relationships. Okay. So, cultural contrast. The Roman Empire's adherence to monogamy contrasted sharply with the polygynous customs of some other ancient empires. Israelite practice. It says polygamy was a practice tradition in Palestine, Judaism during the Second Temple period, but was less common in other parts of Roman Empire. Now, keep in mind, again, don't get tripped up by polygamy and polygyny, because our people were going off using polygamy because they were being mingled amongst the other nations. They were learning and worshiping and using licentious practices or lasciviousness practices. Okay. It says during the Second Temple period, but was less common in other parts of the Roman Empire. Shifting views. Many Jews living in the Roman world adopted the Roman view that polygamy was immoral, and the practice diminished over time. You see, they adopted, because once again, when you are around, being around the Roman Empire, if you are living within their means, you start to take on some of their ways. Give you an example. You've been brought up in America, and let's start from 70s, 80s, 90s, well into the early 2000s, before things started to change. You was brought up in the customs of celebrating Christmas. Okay. You was brought up in the customs of celebrating your birthday. You was brought up in the custom of celebrating Easter. Right. So then you brought up in the custom of, being married and faithful to the one woman. Right. But then over a process of time, if a man was to go out and seek a mistress, as they used to call it back in the day, or in the ancient world, concubine, today you call it a side woman or a side piece, that was frowned upon. Because what? You so-called Americans, you Babylonians today, you've adopted the American way of monogamous relationships. And you Israelites, you so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans living under this man's rulership and his system, you have converted your ways unto his ways. This is why the Bible tells us, if we come back over here, let's get Isaiah, the 24th chapter, verse 5 and 6. It says, the earth also is defiled under the inhabitants thereof, because they have transgressed the laws, changed the ordinance. That's key. What does it mean? Part of change the ordinance. Let's look up the word ordinance.
Strong's H 2706. Chok. Chok.
Okay. It says the statute, ordinance, limit, something prescribed. Was it not prescribed in the scriptures that it was lawful for a man to have more than one woman? Yes, it was. And we're going to show you that in just a second. Do, prescribed tags, prescribed portion, action prescribed for oneself, resolve, prescribed do, prescribed limit, boundary, enactment, decree, ordinance, specific decree, law in general. You see? Enactment, statutes, conditions, enactments, decrees, civil enactments prescribed by the Most High. But check this out. Strong's definition says an enactment, hence in an appointment of time, space, quantity, labor, or usage, appointed, bound, commandment, convenient, custom. This man changed everything. When he came into power, he changed that. No, there's not going to be no polygyny. It's only going to be monogamous. This was an Israelite custom. Now, going back to the law, Exodus 21, okay, and verse 10 and 11, it says, if he take him another wife, key words, another wife, meaning he already had one wife, her food, her raiment, and her duty of marriage shall he not diminish. Let's read this in a different translation. Let me see. I never looked this up in the AMP. Let's get the AMP. Just want to see what it says. It says, if her master marries another wife, he may not reduce her food or her clothing or her privilege as a wife, meaning the first wife, right? If he does not do these three things for her, then she shall leave free without payment of money. But what is taught today in Western society, mainly America, if you divorce, if a woman's been with you and y'all divorce, you have to pay that alimony. Like she gets half of everything. See, that's changed. This was the commandment that was given, the statute, the decree. But since this man came into power, he changed that decree. This is what you Israelites are not understanding. This is something that VOCAB himself don't even understand. You see, let's get it in one more translation, NLT. Verse 10, if a man who has married a slave wife takes another wife for himself, he must not neglect the rights of the first wife to food, clothing, and sexual intimacy. So what you do for one woman, you have to do for the same woman if you take her under your care in your household. If he fails in any of these three obligations, she may leave as free or as a free woman without making any payment. It's just that simple, right? Let's get another example in Deuteronomy, I believe the 22nd chapter and the 15th verse. 15th verse. Actually, no, the 21st chapter, Salakia. Okay. Let's get it in the AMP again. It says, if a man has two wives, one loved and another unloved, and both the loved and the unloved have borne him sons, and the firstborn son belongs to the unloved wife, then on the day when he wills his possessions to his sons, he cannot treat the son of his loved wife as firstborn in place of the son of the unloved wife, the actual firstborn. You see? So the Most High gave an order that if you have two wives, one that's loved and one that's unloved, and let's say the one that you don't really love that much, all right, she borns your firstborn son. When it comes time to pass down the inheritance, the wife that is unloved, who has the firstborn son, it has to go to him. It can't go to the other beloved wife whom you had a son, but he's not the first born. You can't have favors where you just pass it down onto him. You see, but I bring this out to show you that it is lawful for a man to have more than one wife. This is in the law. So the whole point of the matter is, now let's come back to 1 Timothy and let's straighten all of this out. Okay, because see, vocab, what you need to realize is this does not mean that the law was replaced. That's what you're alluding to by you telling them dudes that, oh, why are you preaching that people can have multiple women when the Bible says that you only are subjugated to one wife? No, it doesn't say that. It does not say that. Now, coming back to the commentary where we left off, it says right here where my cursor is, the apostles' meaning, therefore, in these canons is that such persons only were to be entrusted with sacred offices who in their married state had contented themselves with one wife and with one husband at a time, because thereby they had showed themselves temperate in the use of sensual pleasures. We just broke it down. Polygamy, right? Because again, you have to understand the dispensation of time and the practices that were going on with those customs. All right. And if the spirit permits me, we'll quickly look it up before we close out. It says, through the immoderate love of which the Asiatic nations universally practice polygamy. Okay, which is unlawful. Polygyny is lawful, but polygamy is unlawful. And when our people were mingled amongst these Asiatic nations, going back to the ancient Roman Empire, they took part of this practice. This is why Paul came on the scene and he had to restore order. But stick with me because I'm going to show you. It says, in like manner, because according to our Adawanya's determination, persons who divorce each other unjustly were guilty of adultery, right? In other words, you couldn't just divorce your wife for any other reason, except it be of a fornication, which means adultery. That's the only time you can put her away. It says, when they married themselves to others, also because such really have more wives and husbands than one at a time. And what was going on, okay, in the church, for instance, when he wrote the epistle to Corinthians, let's get 1 Corinthians, the 5th chapter, what was going on? 1 Corinthians 5:1, it is reported commonly that there is fornication among you, and such fornication as is not so much as named among the Gentiles, because what? The actual heathen nations were committing such practices. This is the reason why he had to restore order. It says that one shall have his father's wife. They were pretty much committing adultery. This goes back to the book of Leviticus, the 18th chapter. This is why when you jump to the 7th chapter, Paul says what? Now concerning the things whereof ye wrote unto me, it is good for a man not to touch a woman. Now, some people will take this out of context. See, well, Paul, he was on the other way. No, Paul was using wisdom, because when you get with a woman, okay, she can, if you're not well grounded spiritually, she can take you off your course within this ministry. So what Paul was saying in a sense here is, look, it's better to not even be with anyone. So really you can focus on the work of Yahweh Bashem Yahweh Shai. The proof of that is when you jump down, okay. Let me see here. Right. When you jump down to verse 28, and if thou marry, thou hast not sinned. And if a virgin marry, she hath not sinned. Nevertheless, such shall have trouble in the flesh, but I spare you. Why? Because when you drop down, verse 32, but I will have you without carefulness. He that is unmarried cared for the things that belong to Yahweh Bashem Yahweh Shai. Right. When you're not married and you're not focusing on, maintaining things for your woman, your wife, you have more time to focus on the ministry. That's why he said at the start, it is good that a man should not touch a woman, because here in verse 32, when you're unmarried, you can spend majority of your time caring for the things that matter to Yahweh Bashem Yahweh Shai and how you may please Yahweh. But it says in verse 33, but he that is married careth for the things that are of the world, how he may please his wife. That's why he started it off in verse 1 saying, Now concerning the things whereof you wrote unto me, it is good for a man not to touch a woman. That's what that means. But he says, verse 2, this is why you have to go line upon line. Nevertheless, to avoid fornication, which is adultery. Because when you understand what they were practicing back then, they were swapping each other's wives around. A woman was going from man to man to man. Okay. That falls under fornication. So he said, look, nevertheless, to avoid fornication, let every man have his own wife. Now, let me stop here because, again, VOCAB and anybody else coming in the same spirit as him, they'll read this verbatim and think, well, see, that proves that you're supposed to just be with your, own woman. You're not supposed to have multiple women. That's not what it's saying. Because remember, when you go back to the law, dealing with Adam and Eve, it was said that a man shall leave his father and his mother and cleave unto his wife. They twain shall become one flesh. That includes your second wife. She's joined unto you. You two become one flesh. She's a part of your substance. She's a part of your possession. That's mentioned in the book of Sirach. So if a man has 2, 3, or 4 wives, they are classified as his own wife. That's the part that you have to understand. Doesn't matter if he has 2, 3, or 4. They still fall under let every man have his own wife. Just like when Paul got on the Israelites in the church of Corinth, when he said, look, it has been said that some of you desire to have your father's wife. Let's say if a man, he has a woman, but he's looking at his father's wife or a concubine, he's like, damn, I got to have her. This is where Paul's coming in to avoid fornication. Because look, when you go into fornication, okay, we got to pick out these words, man. Goes back to the Greek word porneia, which consists of what? Illicit sexual intercourse, which includes adultery, homosexuality, lesbianism, intercourse with animals, right? Sexual intercourse with close relatives, Leviticus 18 chapter, sexual intercourse with a divorced man or a woman, which they go off here because if a man put away his woman, he's not committing a sin if he marries another single woman. So they went off there. This is why you have to go into these things. But it also can mean on a spiritual note, the worship of idols or of the defilement of idolatry as incurred by eating the sacrifice offered to idols, which is what we did as a nation of people. We committed spiritual fornication unto the Heavenly Father. But nevertheless, coming back to the commentary, it says, in like manner, because according to our Adawanya's determination, persons who divorced each other unjustly were guilty of adultery when they married themselves to others. Also because such really have more wives and husbands than one at a time. You see, as was the case with the woman of Samaria, John 14 and 18. Let's visit that. We'll start at verse 16. Yahushua said unto her, go call thy husband and come hither. The woman answering said, I have no husband. Yahushua said unto her, thou hast well said, I have no husband. For thou hast had 5 husbands, and he whom thou now hast is not thy husband's, and that sayest thou truly. You see? So he got on her because a woman, when you go to the law, let's get Romans 7. This is why you have to try to comprehend what was going on back then. Why was everybody out of order? They were practicing polygamy. Romans 7 and 2, for the woman which hath an husband is bound by the law to her husband so long as he liveth, bound by the law. But if the husband be dead, she is loose from the law of her husband. You see that? It says, so then if while her husband liveth, she be married to another man, she shall be called an adulteress. That's why Yahushua told her, look, hey, even the man that you're currently with now, He's not your husband. Therefore, what? She would have played the role of an adulteress, because what happened to the other 5 men? You see what I'm saying? So come on, let's get another example. All right. Let me get, I might have said it wrong. Yeah, let's get John the 8th chapter. This is another situation, right? To show you what was going on. We'll start at the top. The adulterous woman. Yahushua went unto the Mount of Olives, and early in the morning he came again into the temple, and all the people came unto him, and he sat down and taught them. And the scribes and Pharisees brought unto him a woman taken into adultery. And when they had set her in the midst, they say unto him, Master, this woman was taken in adultery in the very act. Now Moses in the law commanded us that such should be stoned. But what sayest thou? This they said, tempting him, that they might have to accuse him. But Yahushua stooped down and with his finger wrote on the ground as though he heard them not. So when they continue asking him, he lifted up himself and said unto him, He that is without sin among you, let him first cast a stone at her. And again, he stooped down and wrote on the ground. And they which heard it, being convicted by their own conscience, went out one by one, beginning at the eldest, even unto the last. And Yahushua was left alone, and the woman standing in the midst. Now watch this. When Yahushua had lifted up himself and saw none but the woman, he said unto her, Woman, where are those thine accusers? Hath no man condemned thee? She said, No man, Adawan. And Yahushua said unto her, Neither do I condemn thee. Go and sin no more. Now you have to understand, if you have a, if you have a spiritual mind, or if the spirit is working with you, you have to put yourself in this scenario, right? Because clearly these other men, they would have been doing things behind the, behind the curtains as well. Passing women around, committing adultery, taking women from men who put them away and stuff like that. This is the same reason why they asked him in Matthew, can a man divorce his woman for any cause? Let's get that. See, you have to understand these scriptures, man. Let me see. Matthew, is it Matthew 22? Or was it Matthew 13? Let me see. It might be Matthew. Let me see. Salakia, just bear with me. Just bear with me. Yeah, Matthew 19. I thought so. Matthew 19. All right. The Pharisees also came to him, testing him and saying to him, Is it lawful for a man to divorce his wife for just any reason? And why do you think they asked that? Because they were doing that behind closed doors. You see, Yahushua had to restore the order, because divorce, when you get what's that, Malachi 2:16? Yeah, Malachi 2:16, for Yahweh, thy power of Israel, says that he hates divorce. You see? He hates divorce. Why? Now go back to what Yahushua was saying. Matthew 19:4, showing you that Yahushua was in the same mindset of the Heavenly Father. And he answered and said to them, Have ye not read that he who made them at the beginning made them male and female, and said, For this reason a man shall leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. So then they are no longer two, but one flesh. Therefore, what the Most High have joined together, let no man separate. That's why we read Malachi 2:16. The Most High hated divorce. So going on, they said to him, why then did Moses command to give a certificate of divorce and to put her away? And he said to them, Moses, because of the hardness of your hearts, permitted you to divorce your wives, but from the beginning it was not so, which aligns up with Malachi 2:16. The Most High hates divorce. So he says, and I say to you, whosoever divorces his wife except for sexual immorality and marries another commits adultery, and whoever marries her who is divorced commits adultery. That's simple and plain. So now let's come back and finish reading because there's some more meat. So we got that understanding, right? From the Samaritan woman. She had multiple husbands. It says the apostle to restrain these licentious practices, and that's what it was about, which were common among the Greeks and Romans. You see that? This was a common practice, polygamy, right? And so us being mingled among the Greeks and Romans, it says, as well as among the Jews, ordered, Salakia, this down. See if I can get rid of this. I don't think I can. It's all good. It says, let me find, I missed my place. So I got to go back up here now. It says, from the Greeks and Romans, as well as among the Jews, ordered that no widow should be chosen to instruct the younger women, but such as have been the wife of one husband only at a time, which goes back to 1 Timothy 5:9. Okay, let's grab that so you can understand what that's talking about. Okay, and hopefully, you know, there's some edification coming out of this, right? Do not let a widow under 60 years old be taken into the number, and not unless she has been the wife of one man, well reported for good works. Let's stop right there. It would be contradictory to take a woman who has been the wife of multiple husbands, okay, and put her in that sort of role to be brought up to teach other women. Okay, that's you that ain't a good look, man. Okay, that's really not a good look. You got to understand that a woman having multiple men over time, likely through adultery or serial fornication, right? That's what it means. Going back to the bishop, if a bishop / elder took a wife who was known to be promiscuous or had that sort of reputation on her, that is what it means. Let him be blameless, having the wife, or, you know, being a husband of one wife. Otherwise, what? If he was to bring in such a woman, that would damage his credibility. That's what's going to bring the reproach to the ministry and causing murmuring or division within the congregation. So Paul's instruction in both chapters, chapter 3 and also chapter 5, is about maintaining purity, order, and reputation within the body. That's not to say that a bishop couldn't have multiple wives, because when you actually look it up, bishops, they actually have multiple women, but for the sake of the congregation, so that there wouldn't be no murmur around the church or division, so that it wouldn't be frowned upon. What Paul was simply saying, look, it's best to deal with a woman who has been faithful to one man. Okay. Here it is. You come in, you get anointed, you come in into that leadership or that role, and then you got other Akim within the congregation saying, yo, is that Shaquita? Man, she done been with every dude around the block. And he, look at him, the bishop. He was Shaquita. She didn't, you know, excuse my language, but she done sucked off every Tom, Dick, and Harry on the block. That is the order, okay, of which Paul was trying to address. Okay, you got to understand that. And so when we come back here to 1 Timothy 3:2, now you understand when it says a bishop then must be blameless, the husband of one wife, because if he was to go in and take a woman that was known to be promiscuous and jumping from every Tom, Dick, and Harry, that would bring confusion to the congregation. Okay, and it will also I may add, damage his credibility. That's what it means to be blameless. You got to understand that. So when we come back over here, let me see if there's anything else I want. Actually, no, that's pretty much it from that perspective. But I also want to end it with this, because I want to go to a scenario dealing with Ruth. Now, also take into an account, because what we teach here today, especially here at Great Millstone, is that understanding. And you know what? Let's do this. Before we get there, let's go to 1 Corinthians 6 and 12. Okay. This is where you have to understand and use wisdom. Okay. Now, although we know the law was not done away with, Yahweh Shai didn't do away with the law, according to Matthew, the 5th chapter, verses 17 to 19. Right. So therefore, by process of elimination, we understand that according to Exodus 21, verses 10 and 11, that's still in play. However, we are in Babylon the Great. We are in captivity. We are in a kingdom that forces monogamous relationships. So this is 1 Corinthians 6 and 12. NLT, you say I am allowed to do anything, but not everything is good for you. That includes having multiple women. It's not expedient. It may not be profitable on this side. It says, and even though I am allowed to do anything, I must not become a slave to anything. You got to use wisdom. And so the reason why I bring this precept out is because now, watch this. We're going to get in an example, okay, in the book of Ruth, dealing with the kinsman redeemer. And I'm going to use this example to you, Akim, to further prove, to hit the nail on the coffin, why you have to use discernment. And we don't teach brothers to go out and to have multiple wives, although it is lawful for you to do so. But watch this example. This is Ruth chapter 4. I'm going to start at the top. Boaz went to the town gate and took a seat there. Just then, the family redeemer he had mentioned came by. So Boaz called out to him, "Come over here and sit down, friend. I want to talk to you." So they sat down together. Then Boaz called 10 leaders from the town and asked them to sit as witnesses. And Boaz said to the family redeemer, "You know Naomi, who came back from Moab. She is selling the land that belonged to our relative Elimelech." Verse 4. "I thought I should speak to you about it so that you can redeem it if you wish. If you want the land, then buy it here in the presence of these witnesses. But if you don't want it, let me know right away, because I am next in line to redeem it after you." The man replied, "All right, I'll redeem it." Now watch this, because according to that, land of inheritance, this is what it also comes with. Then Boaz told him, "Of course, your purchase of the land from Naomi also requires that you marry Ruth, the Moabite widow. That way she can have children who will carry on her husband's name and keep the land in the family." Because if you understand, the kinsman redeemer was about, if you had a brother who died and he didn't bring up seed to pass down any inheritance, you would then go in to your brother's wife, her being a widow, and you would bring up seed in his name. That's a part of our custom. Okay. Well, I want you to pay attention to this. Verse 6. This is what the man said. "Then I can't redeem it," the family redeemer replied, "because this might endanger my own estate. You redeem the land, I cannot do it." What do you think it was meant when he said, if he were to redeem it, it then will endanger his own estate? I'm going to show you. Now, if you're viewing this in the blue letter, in the NLT version, and you go to cross references, this is what it says. From the Targum, seems to give the proper sense of this passage. "I cannot redeem it because I have a wife already, and it is not fit for me to bring another into my house, lest brawling and contention arise in it. Going back to 1 Corinthians 6 and 12. Though all things are lawful for me, but they are not expedient. It is not profitable. Now, where else can we get an example of what? Because see, he knew and understood the law. Let's go to GNT. Okay. Sirach chapter 26 and verse 6. It says, but a woman jealous of another woman causes heartache and grief. Her tongue lashes out at everyone. You see that? This is in the scriptures. So when we come back to what he said to Boaz, he said, look, that's not why I can't do that, because number one, I got a woman already, and it's not expedient for me to bring in another in my household, lest there's going to be contention, brawling arising in it, which backs up Sirach 26 and 6, which let's read it one more time in the GNT. But a woman jealous of another woman causes heartache and grief. So we here at Great Millstone, we say, look, because it's not our business to know if a brother has multiple women or not. That's to your own prerogative. But just know, just like what is said here, if you have, based upon your substance or whatever your situation is, if Yahweh Shem Shah blesses you to do that, the more the merrier. All praises to Yahweh Shem Shah and to you and your household, right? However, just understand the mindset of the Western woman in this day and age. This is why through the spirit, we tell brothers it is not expedient to do these things, lest you bring contention and brawling in your household. Now, the brother Abaniah, if he's watching this, you can put on a comment board if you choose to, that we dealt with a sister last evening on TikTok that came on a brother Adar Gabar's channel. And she pretty much told me in the Akim that based upon her trauma situation or what she saw of her grandparents being brought up, she said out of her own mouth that she would not put herself in a position to share her man. Well, I got news for you, sister, and any other women in that capacity that's coming in that mindset. We are in a time now where Isaiah 4:1 is coming to pass, whether you like it or not. So in that day, you're either going to put up or you're going to shut up. You're going to get in line, and you're not going to have a say so sharing your man. Matter of fact, you're not even going to have a problem in that day sharing your man, as long as your reproach can be removed from you. Okay. And so to close this out, I want to bring us on a spiritual level. Well, you know what? I might do a part 2 on that because I'm already approaching an hour. Okay. But the point of the matter is, in closing, 1 Timothy 3 verses 1 and 2 is not saying that you are tied to being with one woman. It is saying that a bishop needs to be careful of not choosing a woman who was promiscuous and going around and sleeping with multiple men. And also that man practicing licentious practices by forming himself into the polygamous relationships. And so to steer him of, or rather, let me say this. If you're going to elect an elder to take the office of a bishop, to keep him back from damaging his credibility within the ministry, let him be the husband of one wife, which actually ties into 1 Timothy 5 and 9, a wife who was faithful, being a wife of one husband. Otherwise, if you are found out to be with a woman who was promiscuous, that's going to look bad on your part. And there's going to be a lot of murmuring, okay, and division within the congregation. Can you imagine, again, you get elected to be a bishop, an overseer of the congregation, but then here it is, you brought in a woman and she is known to be your wife. And if there's men within the congregation that have had a past with her, how you think that's going to sit with them? Because you know how brothers get out here when it comes to these women. So that's going to cause division. That's going to damage the credibility of a bishop. That's not to say that a bishop can't have multiple women. It's just that for the sake of order in the congregation, it's not wise to do so. In a limelight that you want to show forth temperance, discipline, order, faithfulness. That's what he was talking about, vocab. Okay. And so I leave you, Akim, here. I pray that this lesson was edifying. That's pretty much all I have to go into the matter. So with that, giving all praise, glory, and honor be to Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahushai, Bahasham, Rakah, HaKodash. Double honors to the apostles and elders of Great Millstone, better known as GMS, who rule well. Peace and salutations unto the hopeful elect, the tabernacle of David. Let's go on to the next. Shabbat Shalom.